Hello everybody and welcome to the Derek Ruby Show. I am your host, the previously mentioned Mr. Ruby, and this is my spoiler-free review of Spider-Man Homecoming. So Spider-Man Homecoming by Sony Pictures is a new joint project with Marvel Productions, and it was fantastic. So let's go ahead and talk about the good. First off, Michael Keaton as the Vulture. Now, I'm a longtime Spider-Man fan, and I can honestly say I never really cared that much about the Vulture. He is a classic character, but they've given him a major update, and Michael Keaton pulls it off brilliantly. I loved his portrayal of the Vulture. They really gave you a reason to care about his motivations as being a villain in this movie, and so Michael Keaton did an A+ job in my book. Plus, when it comes to the actual Vulture suit and effects, the CG was there. You really felt like the Vulture was hovering around and flying through the air. He had a certain presence about him. It was fantastic. He was an exciting character, and he did a tremendous job. Now let's talk about Tom Holland, Spider-Man himself. He really pulled off playing Peter Parker in high school. And when he was Spider-Man, he really pulled off being Spider-Man. You got the sense of struggle and the teenage angst and the fun factor. And I feel like he really captured the essence of what it is to be Spider-Man. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I can't tell you enough how well Tom Holland did as Spider-Man. But for my money, he was an A+. Which brings me to how the Spider-Man movie felt. The movie itself felt really enclosed. It felt like it was its own Spider-Man story. And it definitely took Spider-Man back to its roots. We got the wisecracking young Spider-Man that a lot of us grew up on. And the touch of Marvel, or as a lot of people like to call them Marvel-isms, was all over this movie, and that was a good thing. The comedic timing was there. We had action, suspense, and drama, and all the things that Marvel likes to do wrapped up into one. And when it comes to the action, it gave you everything you wanted, and it was very well paced. We really got to see Spider-Man being Spider-Man. And many characters that you're familiar with had an update, such as Flash Thompson. So Flash Thompson is being played by Tony Revolori. Traditionally, Flash Thompson was a jock that beat up on Peter Parker, and now he's just more of a popular kid. He's smart like Peter, he's always in competition with him, he's always trying to make fun of him. They even show him being a DJ at one point. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this change, but it's not bad because I do believe that the whole jock beating up the nerd cliche pretty much went out the window about 10 or 20 years ago. The only downside to it is I'm not exactly sure why he's so popular. Maybe it's because he's not as socially awkward as Peter, but for whatever reason it works. Now, a character that a lot of you fans may be familiar with if you read the Ultimate Spider-Man with Miles Morales is Gank Lee. Now, Gank Lee's name in this movie is Ned, but it's basically supposed to be that character. I have no idea why they included this character in the Spider-Man movies. I know this probably upset Miles Morales fans, and maybe some fans on the opposite end of the spectrum, but the fact is it worked in this movie. Jacob Batalon did an excellent job playing this character, and it worked well as a great foil for Peter Parker. The two worked well together. There was a lot of elements from the Ultimate Spider-Man that was kind of stuck into this. And while there are a few fans that may be upset that Miles Morales is not in these movies at this point, the fact is there's really only one true Spider-Man, and if you look at a brand like Coca-Cola, it also has Sprite. Look at Miles Morales as being the Sprite in the Spider-Man universe. There's nothing wrong with being Sprite, and there's plenty of room for Coca-Cola to have Sprite as well. So I have no doubt sometime in the future we will get a Miles Morales movie, so just be patient. But nobody could argue that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and without him you don't have Miles Morales, and this is a wonderful Spider-Man movie. And I can't stress enough how well the plot worked in this movie. It was tied into the Marvel Universe very well. Tony Stark made numerous appearances, and his appearances meant something. Matter of fact, when Tony Stark shows up, played by Robert Downey Jr. of course, that's when the movie really gets the meat of its story, and it all ties in into a nice, great package. Now let's talk about the bad. Laura Harrier plays Liz, the love interest of Spider-Man, and while Liz is not much different than her comic counterpart, her character is not really fleshed out. Don't get me wrong, she's an important part of this story, but at the same time, her character is not fully developed, and I really would have liked that they would have fleshed her out just a little bit more. Laura Harrier was fine, just the character needed a little bit more development. And of course, Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. I've always found this to be an odd choice since Captain America Civil War. Don't get me wrong, Marissa Tomei is still hot for her age, and the movie never lets you forget that. The big problem with this is, anytime you have an emotional or sensitive moment with Aunt May and Peter Parker, the fact that the movie has drilled into your head how hot she is kind of takes away from those sentimental moments. Marissa Tomei as Aunt May is different, I like it, it's a new concept, but it would work much better if you stopped beating into our head how hot she is, and we could take the character a lot more seriously. And this next part is kind of a negative, but it's also a positive depending how you look at it. There really wasn't much of an origin story fleshed out in this movie. Civil War kind of set up that we're going to get a Spider-Man movie, and usually in the first one we get an origin story. On the flip side of it, we've had 2 series of Spider-Man movies with origin stories. And most people are usually divided on this issue. I am one of the people that says you don't have to have an origin story in every single movie. But on the other hand, it is the first movie. Not that I reference this movie too much in a good way, but Batman v Superman, they told the story of Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed right in the opening credits in a very masterful way that was new and different and got its point across, and they didn't dwell on it. The first Iron Man movie told you who Tony Stark was and everything about him in less than 10 minutes. So there was really no reason that they really couldn't have fleshed out a little bit of an origin story for Peter Parker. So in my eyes, that's a little bit of a negative. But overall, that's mostly the bad that I can even think of to talk about, because this was a wonderful experience. So what do I think of Spider-Man Homecoming? It was amazing and spectacular, pardon the puns. The thing that this movie has gotten right that the other movies have gotten wrong is you really feel like you're watching a Spider-Man movie. It has the feel of the comics, the cartoons, everything that you love about Spider-Man is kind of wrapped up in this movie. Just the complete essence of the character. Parker has growing pains, he overcomes them. You get to see Spider-Man doing his web-swinging action, quick one-liners, and everything that you would want. So the writers of this movie obviously respect the source material, and I really, really appreciate that. If anything, you should go out and see this movie because it's going to be a fun time. I don't know about you, but when I go to the movies, I go to have fun. I go to enjoy the movie. I go there to turn my brain off and to just think about what I'm watching and thinking about the wonderful time I just had. And this movie accomplishes all that. So even though I had a couple nitpicks about it, overall I can easily overlook them because it was just such a good experience. So I'm going to give Spider-Man Homecoming 5 stars. So thank you guys for listening to the Derek Ruby Show. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. And as always, have a good one. And I'll see you guys next time. The big problem with this is, anytime you have an emotional or sensitive moment with Aunt May and Peter Parker, the fact that the movie has drilled into your head how hot she is kind of takes away from those sentimental moments.